This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. You already know, it's my podcast. Or you know what? Maybe you don't know, because I think we're going to have a lot of new listeners this week. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Happy to have you guys here. This is a big one. Kaskade is my guest on the show today. Kaskade just released his 10th album, 10 albums deep. This is the Kaskade Christmas album. It just came out last week. And you know what? I was ready to not like it. Christmas albums, not really my thing. Holiday songs, not really my thing. Also, I'm a Jew. You know, the odds are kind of stacked against me liking a Christmas album. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. I actually like it. I'm not just saying that because he's the guest on the show. If I didn't like it, I just wouldn't really mention it. It's dope. It's good vibes. Go get it. And Kaskade has a couple tour dates left before the end of the year. December 1st and 2nd, he's in New York. He's finishing up his redo tour with a show at Analog and a show at Output this weekend. You know, we talk about these redo tour shows in the conversation you're about to hear, but they're very small, very intimate. The downside is I'm pretty sure these shows have been sold out for months, so I'm kind of just teasing you guys. But hey, if you're in New York, hop on Craigslist. Maybe somebody got sick, needs to sell a ticket. Maybe you can impersonate someone. Maybe you look like somebody who bought a ticket. Maybe you can do some sexual favors for somebody. I'm not the idea guy here. I'm just letting you know the information. But if you miss out on that and you need to see Kaskade before the end of the year, New Year's Eve in San Francisco at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. Second year in a row he's done that. And I'm going to put a link in the description of this show where you can go get the new album. You can get all the tour dates, all the information. So check out the description in the link. So before we get into that conversation, let's run through some quick business here. I've got a new remix dropping this week. It's my remix for Axwell, I Found You. It's dropping this Thursday, the 30th of November. Go get that, stream that, download that, steal that, whatever you want to do. It's the first new music I put out in a few months. It's the first of many. I've been working hard in the studio. It's a hectic tune. I fucking love it. I hope you guys will too. Axwell, I Found You, Willy Joy remix. All right, moving on. Last week, we continued the contest we've been running to help young music producers win a free copy of FL Studio 12. It was awesome seeing all your guys' tweets about it. We compiled it all, put it into a hat, and picked out a random name. The winner this week is Logan_Ickert. Congratulations to Logan. We're going to have the team reach out to you. You just won a copy of FL Studio 12. We're going to put the contest on hold just for this week because it's a special episode. But next week, tune back in. We're going to be giving away more copies of FL Studio 12 just because I want to give you guys something. It's the holidays. And the only thing I want from you guys in return is to subscribe to this show. Click the little subscribe button on whatever app you're using to listen to this. If you're listening on SoundCloud, just follow the back-to-back account. It's super easy. Every time I post a new episode, which is weekly, by the way, it's just going to pop up right on your phone, right on your computer, and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. That helps us out a lot. It's easy to do. It takes about 5 seconds. And honestly, that's the only thing I want for Christmas. Or Hanukkah. I'm a Jew. I forget sometimes. And if you did all of that and you feel like it's just still not enough, you still have more you want to tell me, you can email me at backtobackpod@gmail.com. Send me your questions. Send me songs you're working on. Tell me what guest you want to hear on the show. I love talking to you guys. You can also hit me up on all social media at Willy Joy, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, everything. Holler at me. But for right now, I want to get into this episode with Kaskade. So going into this conversation, it's hard to even know where to start with a guy like Kaskade. 10 albums deep, 6-time Grammy-nominated artist. He's done everything. Remixes for Beyonce, Outkast, Jack U, He remixed Leanne Rimes. I mean, look, there's nothing this dude has not done or cannot do. One of the things we talk about in this conversation is how he's sort of managed to carve out his own lane. Over the time, no one else is really in his category. He's not thinking like everybody else. This was a conversation unlike any other that I've had, and I really enjoyed it. We met up at his studio complex / office / arcade / gorgeous warehouse that I just want to live in up in Santa Monica. And, a lot of people who I have on this show, I have some connection to usually. Either it's a friend of mine or it's a friend of a friend. None of that is the case here. I had never met Kaskade before. Wasn't even really connected to him through anybody I know, which is rare. And so I was a little anxious, anytime you're going to talk to a stranger to try to make a connection. But he was just a warm, open guy. The conversation flowed really easily. And actually, once we started talking, we ended up finding out that we have a fair number of connections. And one thing that really struck me throughout this whole conversation was just his sense of fun and excitement. You could tell he's still so engaged. Even after all these experiences, it would be really easy for somebody to get burnt out, or at least to just start treating it like a business and just kind of keep the machine going, keep the money flowing in. But that's not the case at all here. What you're going to hear is a guy who's maybe more excited than ever about what he's doing, about his music, his shows, his business, everything. He was an inspiring guy, a unique person. I've never had a conversation exactly like this before. Let's get into it right now. This is me and Kaskade, back to back. Let's go. Maybe we should start just by setting the scene. Where are we right now for our listeners? Because I'm kind of blown away by this facility.
Oh, awesome. That's the whole point. We're here at my studio in Santa Monica. It's relatively new.
Looks brand new.
Yeah, I mean...
Or do you just keep it clean?
I'm very clean person.
Just in general?
I moved in here a little over a year ago, but it's been fully functioning for probably about 6 or 7 months. So I moved in and the monitors weren't in here yet. The desk wasn't in here.
Right.
But for 6 months, I've been working out of here and just kind of slowly adding and accumulating and getting it all kind of set up. But to get it wired and everything, it's been wired and like locked and loaded. And I've been tracking and working out of here for 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, well, it looks fantastic. What was the first studio environment that you can remember working in, as a starting producer? Were you producing out of your bedroom?
Yeah, I was. I mean, look, till very recently, I moved in here a year ago. I was, even on automatic, there's a couple of songs that I wrote sitting at my kitchen table.
Sure.
And I mean, that's kind of the idea behind electronic music. Right? Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
All you need is like a good idea and a laptop and you're ready to go.
I mean, my studio literally is in my bedroom.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean,
it's great.
I've had that for many, many years. So the first real setup I had, I was actually living in Salt Lake across the street from a nightclub in a very dingy, bad part of town. It was a big, open warehouse. And that's where I started buying my first bits of gear. The personal computer wasn't quite strong enough then to do what we do now. So the idea of a digital audio workstation was still really new. And multi-track recording was just a brand new thing. Guys were still recording to DAT, ADAT, and tape and doing stuff like that back then. But I just started collecting gear. I had a Mac 7100. Woof.
Wow.
It was a beast.
I'm trying to picture what that looked. I know that model, but I'm trying to picture what that looked like.
I mean, it was a desktop. It was beige.
Yeah,
it wasn't sexy at all.
Big, clunky thing,
yeah, big clunky brand. And but whatever. I mean, at the time, it's like I went out and got a credit card and maxed it out so I could get a machine that and I convinced myself that it was for school. Like, I need this for design.
It's an investment. Yeah.
This will help my future. I think it took me 7 years to pay that thing off.
Of course, man.
But anyway, and then I bought a Sound Designer 2 card, a very early two in, two out, new bus card. I had to take the top off the computer and stick the card in. And that was really my first kind of foray into this whole world.
Sure.
And really back then, what I used it for initially was just rearranging songs. More of kind of a remix tool than anything, because it just
chopping audio.
I was just chopping audio and rearranging. I had a really cool weekly party going on that helped put me through school.
Okay.
And I was just taking old disco records and chopping them up.
Kind of almost early mashup style.
Early mashup, rearrangement, remix.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I guess back then there wasn't even really a word for it, right?
I mean, yeah, who knows what we were calling it back then? Just screwing around and having fun, like making music, screwing around with music.
Sure. Well, and before you were in Salt Lake, you were originally from Illinois, is that right?
Yeah. I grew up in Northbrook, born in Evanston Hospital, right there outside of Chicago, the North Shore.
Yeah.
My first 18 years of my existence were in Chicago, born and raised there.
That's fantastic. I'm a Midwest boy, born and raised. I was born in Minneapolis, but Chicago is kind of where I made my career and where I consider home, even though I don't live there anymore.
I love both those cities.
I do too.
I was just in Minneapolis last week, man. I love that place.
I just flew in there from there yesterday.
Right on.
Maybe we were there at the same time. That's weird.
But very possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up in Northbrook, set the scene a little bit as far as what was going on culturally around you and musically around you as you're, 5 years old, 10 years old. Do you have early musical memories? Was your family musical at all?
I mean, it's hard for me to compare because that's the only family I know.
Sure.
Sure they're musical. There was a lot of
were they playing
Bee
instruments?
Gees and ABBA. Yes, we had a piano in my front room and everybody had to play. That was the deal. It wasn't even like you couldn't question it. I don't know. I think kids back then didn't question anything.
Right.
But
would it be, your parents would have guests over and you'd perform for the guests or something like that?
I was really never that guy. I had two older brothers. The brother that's right above me, Richard, is more of a ham, and he was always like, yeah, look at me,
Right.
So I was like the quiet guy sitting in the corner,
Sure.
like being like, man, my brother's such a ham bone. What's the deal? But so there was music in my home. Took piano lessons. My oldest brother got into drumming. There was a drum set and full drum kit in his room. And
your parents must have loved that.
Yeah, so I mean, musical instruments were always around, and music was just a part of what we were doing, but not. When I hear other people talk about it, other musicians, their parents were very serious and you had to do this. My family just wasn't very serious about anything.
Okay. So they laid out some options and you were kind of free to...
Yeah, just kind of did our thing, whatever, took some lessons, didn't like it, took some dry lessons, thought that was all right, didn't like it. I didn't really stick with much. I'm not...
Okay. So no instrument particularly grabbed you?
No.
Well, what did first grab you in a serious way that you can remember as a child? Be it, just a song you heard or, something you were interested in doing?
So, look, I had two older brothers. They were collecting records.
Yeah.
Dog Ear Records was down the street from us, and it was a place that you could go, and they had this used record bin, and for very cheap, you could pick up vinyl. They were into buying records. That was the format of the time. So when I say that, people are like, what? Wow, that's crazy. No, that's what we were actually buying.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I have crates of records at home,
Yeah, so I was buying records, and I was just really interested in music, loved listening to music. I mean, it was a big deal when I got my first Walkman, Sony Walkman. That was a big deal because I could put in a mixtape that I had made or, something that I dubbed off the radio, a bunch of tunes that I liked in a row and put my headphones on and kind of be in my own space. And I really appreciated that. And that was a big deal for me. And I just listened to a lot of music. I mean, from that point on, kind of from middle school on, I was like, music.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting you say that because, making the mixtapes just for yourself, just so you could enjoy a sequence of songs in the order you wanted it. I mean, that's all we do now, right? As DJs.
That's pretty much
it's
what
just selecting the
paid
music,
to
right?
do that. That's amazing.
It didn't pay so good back then, but...
No, it did not.
Yeah. So, moving forward from there, getting into high school as you're becoming more of an independent person, a young man, how did music evolve? Was there a point when you sort of thought, hey, maybe this could actually be something I do, not for fun, something I do seriously for work?
Not until much later in my
Okay.
life.
So it was a
in high
gradual
school, yeah, it's
process.
very gradual. I move very slowly.
What were you like in high school? What were you doing, for
Um,
fun as a kid?
I was definitely the oddball, the freak. Didn't really fit in, although I enjoyed athletics and sports. Like I played soccer and swam and
Sure.
played lacrosse on the lacrosse team and cross country. So I did a lot of that stuff, and I had friends. I don't want to make it sound like I was a total outcast.
Right.
Very early on, actually, the summer before I went into high school, I had some older friends that were going into the city, and they were all into house music. And I started going to nightclubs at 15.
Okay.
I couldn't even drive. It's like we would either have somebody drive us or we could take the train into the city. Where I was
Right.
located was fairly close to the train, and we could get on the train and go into the city. Like I said, my parents were pretty lax for the most part, and
So they didn't have a problem with you.
they didn't have a problem with that. I was like, I'm going to the city, I'm dancing. They're like, all right, you're dancing? They thought it a bit odd, but, and really that was the first time that I kind of knew that I loved house music. I went into the city, saw these nightclubs, saw a DJ spinning, had this love for music. All that's going along while I'm in high school, playing sports, extracurricular activities, doing all this stuff.
Sure,
I was in
normal kid
choir,
stuff.
and people are like, well, when did you get serious about it? I really loved choir, and I did, like, we had the group choir, and then we had chamber choir, which was like the serious people choir,
Okay.
like a group of, 20-something of us
Sure.
that we practiced, rehearsed a lot, and did a lot of shows. And I had that, and I had drama and whatever. So I'm just going along, but really it was when I started going out and going to these clubs that I got put on to different music. Because before that point, it was always like, what are my older brothers listening to? What's on the
Sure.
radio? It's
Sure.
just like what's at my fingertips.
Yeah, and the options were a lot more limited back in those days
Yeah,
for
yeah.
discovering music,
Yeah,
right?
it was hard to find stuff,
Yeah.
So we didn't have Spotify.
Right.
We
None
had
of-
terrestrial radio, and that's it.
Sure. Well, and even then going to those clubs and hearing those DJs, I'm sure you didn't know what most of those records were, right?
Nobody did. We were like, what the hell is this?
Right.
It's like, not only did we not know the songs, the sound was different than anything I'd ever heard before. It's very different.
Sure. Well, in Chicago, being the home of house music, I mean, it was being born at that time, right?
It was. This is the mid 80s. I mean, this is when it's all going down.
Who were the big guys that you heard first that kind of blew your mind?
This is even pre really DJ culture.
Okay.
Frankie Knuckles was throwing a weekly party at the club that I frequented. And it was cool, and he was great, and we loved him.
Right.
And we're like, wow, this flavor is great. It's very housey.
Right.
When the Saturday guy was much more a mix of kind of industrial, new wave, and house music. Because back then, I mean, it was all kind of the same. It was all like drum machine music,
Right.
Well,
and very early house music could be mistaken for, say, disco or new wave. There was a lot
very
of
similar.
bleeding into each other.
Right. I think they were all getting, inspired from one another. And they were using the same tools. The tools were a lot more limited back then.
Right.
There was like 10 drum machines out there.
Yeah.
Like, here's this SP1200. Everybody was using it, Yeah, so I got it. That's kind of how I got into the music. And I discovered that there was a record store nearby the club, Gramophone Records, and that's where I started
legendary.
going. That whole neighborhood right there, Wrigleyville, was just rocking.
That was where I first lived when I moved to Chicago, was right in Lakeview there.
Which now it's like this super posh, nice, kind
God.
of beautiful neighborhood.
Right.
Back then, this was really like rough and tumble. To be around the stadium was like, wow, you guys are crazy.
Right. What was the club you were going to?
It was called Medusa's.
Okay.
It was on Sheffield and, I forget the cross street. But anyway, it wasn't far from all of that.
Yeah, Belmont or something like that. Yeah, there were a lot of, I was there much later than you were, but you could tell there's still vestiges of the old neighborhood and the old culture there. And it was cool to live there as a first place to be in Chicago.
Right.
And, when I moved there, it was, close to Smart Bar, which was then the spot for legendary house music and still is.
Incredible place. I had a residency there for, I don't know, 6 years or something like this.
That's right.
Which was just awesome.
And Gramophone, too. Just that little 1 mile radius stretch. I remember like the first mixtape I ever made, I got Gramophone to carry it on consignment.
Yeah.
And just when I saw it, that, it was just like a little crappy homemade CD that I printed up the cases for myself. And just when I saw it in their little glass case, I mean, I could have quit the business right there. I was the happiest I'd ever been.
I have a record and gramophone.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I couldn't imagine a higher accomplishment at that point.
This is cool, man. I mean, gramophone. Well, I mean, back then, gramophone, when they were getting new records, everyone would be in there.
Yeah.
And, actually one of the last conversations I had with Frankie Knuckles, we were just both in there, bumped in. I happened to be in town. And he walks in. He's like, hey, Kaskade, what's happening, man? And, we kind of had this back and forth and caught up a little bit. And there it happened in Gramophone Records. And I think, for people that really know and understand and appreciate the history of house music, it was a cool thing. It was the record store in the town that kind of pioneered this sound. So there were so many people that were coming through that space and paying attention at the time, and a lot of camaraderie. I was too young to be a part of it and too timid to speak up. I'm a high school kid. I just felt lucky to go in there and track through a couple records and buy one or two on the off chance that I had a few bucks to rub together.
Right. Did anyone kind of take you under their wing there? Were you accepted by the older guys? Or you were just kind of an observer?
I was much more an observer, for sure.
Yeah.
I was this kid, whatever, just watching out, trying to see what people were doing and understand what was happening.
Watching really, the history be made.
That's right. Just trying to find cool records. Like, what are these guys playing? Because back to that point of, I really didn't know the music, and you had to go in there and be like, oh, I heard this one song, it went like this, or this was the vocal line or the riff, and they'd be like, oh, it might be this or it might be that. Check this out, listen through this stuff, and oh, this is it. Sure enough, here it is.
Well, and another thing I was curious about, sort of to jump off of that point, is that you also had a religious upbringing, right?
Yeah.
As a Mormon. And that's interesting to me because I think there's a common conception for somebody who doesn't know about dance music and electronic music that it's sort of this debaucherous, crazy party, nonstop, 24-hour thing.
And that is certainly part of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've certainly seen some things. But, for me, thinking about it, driving over here, especially thinking about Chicago house and the early house scene, and, hearing you talk about the choir and knowing that, your music is so based in lyrics and melodies and is so much about the song at the core of it, more than, at least that's my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's wonderful. I love that opinion.
Good. Okay, perfect. And to me, there's this, this element of, maybe this is going too far, but I would say this element of the church, there's this gospel house that was a whole large offshoot of house music.
Huge,
and especially in Chicago, I think about a lot of the other OGs, the originators of house music, and, I know some of them a little bit. I know some of them are also religious. And it just struck me that I think there is sort of this religious undercurrent to some of that music that maybe doesn't get talked about. And
I don't know why. Maybe that's taboo. I don't know. For me, that's there for sure. Listen, I think as a songwriter, as an artist, all you're really doing is amplifying or sharing or extracting part of you and sharing that with people, right?
Sure.
So it's hard for me to listen. I'm a devout Mormon. It's hard for me to kind of take that out of who I am. That is the person that I am. So, of course, when I write and make music, there's an element of that in there.
Sure.
I'm not writing songs about Joseph Smith.
Right?
But I think when I come up with lyrics and all this kind of flows out of me, that's going to be in there. There's going to be an impression in there somewhere, right?
Sure, of course.
So it's hard to take that away from it. But, and it doesn't get talked about much. That whole, gospel house thing didn't really last that long. I think in the beginning it was there and people enjoyed it and it had its moment. And nobody really talked about it, and you certainly don't hear anything about it today.
Yeah. But. Well, and even for me, I came up when I started DJing. I was playing a lot, buying a lot of house music, vinyl, playing a lot of house music. It's not what I ended up doing sort of professionally, but I still have all that music. I still love it. And I found myself buying a lot of the gospel house kind of stuff, which for me, I'm Jewish, but I'm not a good Jew. I'm not, really observant at this point. And so mostly non-religious, but then I would just kind of naturally, I was falling in love with all of these gospel house songs and just, the sound of it, the melody of it.
A lot of them are really well done.
Yeah.
Even if you believe in nothing, you could still be like, wow, this is a great record.
Right.
This is, there's the harmony here.
There's multiple levels. And then I start thinking about, some of the all-time greatest melodies and songs that come from religion, right? I mean, I think about traditional Jewish music, which I'm familiar with, some incredible songs that even though I'm not practicing and never was really serious about my religion, those songs still affect me when I hear
resonate.
them.
Yeah. I mean, a good song is a good song.
Right.
And I think, listen, a great song is timeless. And typically, in a lot of cases, it's something that's uplifting or has an emotion or a feeling that grabs people, whether it's religious or not,
Right.
But it's something of substance there.
Did you ever get any feedback or any pushback from sort of the Mormon community that was around you as your career progressed? Because I think for most people, the idea of being very religious and then, or I should say devoutly religious and also, being a traveling DJ and performing late at night. Was anyone concerned? Did you ever get any feedback about that?
No, not really.
That's great.
And I think that's because, look, I think any working musician or working DJ or personality or people that are in entertainment can probably relate to this. It's just because people don't take you seriously.
Right.
And DJing's even worse when you're like, I DJ, and people are like, oh, so you're like on a morning radio show.
Isn't that the worst?
No, wait, no, I don't do that.
Sometimes
not like
I don't even
person.
want to tell people. I just don't even want to say I'm
Right.
a DJ.
Right. So, I learned early on to stop saying that. I'm like, oh, I'm a musician. I write music.
Yeah.
I'm a music producer. I don't know. It's always kind of like a joke between my wife and I. What am I going to say when somebody asks me? It's like, what day of the week is it?
Right.
What am I today? But people would understand that when I say music producer, people would be like, oh, cool. What projects are you working on? Oh, well, I've seen the most success with my own project. I write and produce music. Okay, cool. So I think I never got any flack because people just had no clue what I was doing. Like
Right.
when I was in town and went to church on Sunday, like, who are you? What do you do? Oh, yeah, I'm here. I live down the street. I'm not here a lot. So.
Sure, yeah.
But no, listen, I think Mormons, generally speaking, are pretty open, and nobody gave me any flack. And
That's great.
and now that I'm successful, people are just like, yeah, that's awesome.
Right, yeah. No, of course, I'm sure they're thrilled now. So moving forward in time a little bit, you went off to college in Utah, as you had mentioned. And what was the impetus to go out there? Why Utah?
What was it? I don't know. I think it's like something a lot of Mormon kids do. Growing up in Chicago, I didn't know a lot of other Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't that many of us out there. I know a few, of course. I went to a high school of, 2,500 kids. There were 3-4 other Mormon kids
Okay.
there. So it's like I knew some other Mormons.
Sure.
It's not like I was fully alone. But for me, I think it was just about going out and going to university where meet other Mormons. Be like, oh, cool, this is what's happening. This is great.
Maybe you knew there was a community of people out there you could relate to in a way you hadn't been able to. And
Exactly. You get it. It's like for Jewish people going to Israel or something.
Sure.
Like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go to university here where I can meet other Mormons and see what they're about. So there was that, and my older brothers went there and they loved it, and they're like, the mountains are amazing, skiing's incredible. And I'm like, all right, I love snowboarding.
Oh,
sure, why not? And whatever. It's like, I think for me, it's just about getting out of the house more than anything.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can relate to that. Did it work out? Did you like it out there? Did you meet, people that you were searching for that connection and you found it in those people?
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed Utah. I love the outdoors. I thought the environment it's very dry and hot. So it was a little overwhelming.
It's a change.
Yeah, it's a change. Like I'm used to really humid wet,
Yeah.
hot summers, and I went out there and it was really dry and hot, and I was like, wow, my body doesn't like this.
I'm the same way.
I prefer the ocean.
I'm still not used to being out here in Southern California.
Oh, man. And this is nothing compared to the desert
I know.
in Utah and Vegas and all that. Yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I had a fun time. Went to college, went snowboarding a lot.
Was that more the focus than studying?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I sloughed my way through school. Went
What were
snowboarding
you
a lot.
ostensibly studying?
Communications.
Nice.
So I had a radio show for 2 years.
College
which was
radio?
cool. College radio was good. I stole a lot of records from the radio station. Sorry, University of Utah. I'll come clean right now.
So I think they'll be okay with it.
In the 90s, vinyl was not cool, though. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
So, they're like, oh, why do we have all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm just, loading up
Let
my
me help
bag.
you with that. Yeah.
I don't know. We should just throw this stuff away. Jeez.
Yeah, and you're like, you're right. Yeah, nobody wants that.
Somebody right now is listening to this podcast and they're like, but I thought he's Mormon. Why is he stealing the records? That's how much records mean to me.
That's right. And were you DJing by this point? When did the idea of actually you performing as a DJ come around?
Right after I left Chicago. Literally, I left in that first semester that I was gone. I had a couple crates of records. I belonged to one of these social clubs, not a sorority fraternity, same kind of thing. We call it a social club, whatever. And the DJ how do we raise money? And I'm like, I don't know. I got a crate full of really cool records. I could play them loudly and people will dance.
It's natural order of things, yeah.
Right. So I did that, and I rented a DJ setup, and I didn't really know how to use this stuff, but I kind of fumbled my way through it. I had messed around on turntables before at friends' houses and whatnot. But that was my first kind of jump into it.
And those college days, I was DJing in college too. Those were still some of the most fun times that I can remember.
Yeah, just rowdy, people having a good time.
Yeah, and really just about the vibe and the experience, right?
That's it.
It's weird because as a performing DJ, I certainly do have an ego. I like it when people come to see me. It feels good. But back in those college days when kind of no one cared who was DJing as long as the music was good and probably wouldn't even look at the DJ, weirdly, I have really fond memories of that. I don't know if that's the same for you.
Well, because yes, it is. Because I think it's so new. And you're just getting off on the idea that these people are having such a good time at your selection and the way you're blending and moving through the stuff, which I'm sure I sucked and I could probably not even match two beats to save my life. But
were you excited about sharing this music that you had kind of discovered that was still in its infancy that people might not know about yet?
Yeah, look, I wish we could cut to some kid who lived next to me in the dorms because everyone was like, once again, I already was an oddball growing up in Chicago, doing my outside, going and taking the train into the city, and these guys are going to football games. Cut to college, and everybody's kind of doing the same thing, going to football games, whatever. I'm like, no, man, you got to check out my record. Chicago's the best. Chicago house music. Chicago. Everyone's like, could this kid from Chicago please shut up?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm cramming house music down all their throats and whatever. Most of them were pretty accepting and thought it was funny, and some of them nicknamed me Big City and whatever.
It seems like a lot of these early experiences were just sort of people thinking that you had a cute hobby. And that's sort of how you were able to kind of get in these doors. And
can you imagine all these people are at college, I'm studying to be a doctor, I'm studying to be a lawyer, and and I'm like, I don't know, man, I like to mix beats.
Right. Especially in that era.
Yeah, no one could take that seriously.
Yeah, because I think in this day and age, it's sort of almost a cliche joke that everyone's trying to be a DJ, right? Whereas back then, it must have been almost the polar opposite.
Yeah, of course.
That you would say you want to be a DJ, and people might not even know what that meant.
I had no idea what I was talking about.
So how did it evolve for you in school there? Did you do a full 4-year, sort of standard university experience?
I did. I was kind of back and forth. I did my first year of school at BYU, and then I served a mission like many Mormons do in Tokyo, Japan. Went to Tokyo for a couple years, came back for a very short stint. I came back to Chicago for a minute, said hello to my parents, did whatever, went to another semester of school. And And by this time, house music was starting to really have a moment. This is early 90s. It was weird because I saw it in the 80s in Chicago, and then I'm like, wow, this is really growing into be something. Like raving was a term now. Things were starting to happen. Anyway, so I took a job in New York, working for a Japanese company, taking Japanese tourists around New York, because at this time I'd lived in Japan for a few years. I was fluent in Japanese.
Right.
So I moved to New York and went night clubbing a lot more and bought a lot more records.
Sure.
And started taking this hobby a bit more serious. Still at that point, I was still like, whatever, you know.
Right.
I like music. I buy lots of music. And
did you see a change from when you left to go to Japan by the time you came back?
Totally.
Yeah.
In those 2 years, this is 91, 92, it just went crazy.
And what were those 2 years in Japan for you like? Were you mostly focused on your mission at that point, or were you still kind of...
It was like a timeout. Everything went on pause.
Yeah.
Cool. I was still listening to music, not contemporary house music or anything. No, I was listening to they're actually pretty stringent about music in the mission. They're like, they're really listening to like pop music and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Look, you're out working, you're out proselyting, you're not...
Right.
You're not hanging out with the radio and like going to your girlfriend's house and hanging out. You're actually like doing service work for the church and donating blood and teaching English or going out and talking about scriptures. And
at the time, was that something you were excited to go and do?
Completely. I was, listen, Mormons, when I meet Mormons, every once in a while, they're trying to like get the temperature, like get the gauge out and be like, are you into it really?
Right.
Nah, it was totally, listen, when I went on the mission, it was exciting.
And I only ask because I'm fascinated. I know very little about Mormonism, so I'm ignorant, and it's very interesting to me to think about, at that age, picking up and going to a country where you didn't speak the language.
It can be scary, but I think, because look, dude, I could have got called to Wyoming or Nevada, I could have been called anywhere in the world.
Oh, okay.
That's the deal.
So
you don't actually say,
you
don't know. You put in the papers and say, cool, I'm ready to go. Here's the dates that I go, and I'm eligible, and I'm healthy, and I'm, worthy and ready to help out. It's like, it's a service.
Right.
And then they put you in these different places. So the fact that I got called to Tokyo made it that much more exciting. I was already like, yeah, cool, I'm going to go help out, take some time off of school.
Right.
I was already excited to go out and help, but the fact that I was going to Tokyo blew my mind. It was awesome. I was like, Japan's awesome. I don't even know what it is, but I love it.
How do you operate there before I assume you show up and you still don't know the language. So how are you able to sort of serve while you're there?
You get a crash course for 8 weeks on music and just religion, but it certainly helps. You go there with a little bit of a foundation, like, hello, my name's Ryan Radden.
Right.
What's the weather like? Where's the toilet? You get these like, a couple hundred words down and a few phrases, and then you kind of go on your way, and then it's sink or swim. And I don't know, by the time you're there 5-6 months, for me...
They say that's the best way to learn a language.
For me, it certainly was, because I did terrible in Spanish. I failed out of Spanish in middle school.
Is that right?
If my kids are listening, it wasn't that bad. Study. Spanish is awesome.
Spanish is great.
But then when I was there and surrounded by it, I don't know, it was easy for me to imitate. And when I say easy, listen, I studied my butt off every day. I woke up at
it's a hard
5 in the morning and studied for an hour or two and got into it. But easier than I think what people imagine. Being there and being surrounded and by it helps a lot.
Yeah, and at that age, too, just being surrounded and immersed in such a foreign culture, too, that must be so eye-opening. And
it was.
I can only think that must be a really valuable experience.
It was cool, and definitely one of those things. It's just kind of one of the pieces that makes me,
right?
And it's all in there.
And so, you mentioned you came back to New York, and came
back to New York, went to night clubbing a lot, worked for this company, was great, made some money, which had been the first time in my life that I actually...
From music?
Yeah, well, not from music, from actually working for this company, working my butt off.
You just mean making money in general. Yeah.
Like a real job.
Right.
I mean, up to then I was like mowing lawns in high school.
Of course, yeah.
But this was the first legit. I mean, I had like valet parked cars in high school.
Right.
I made some money, but this
Yeah.
was like I was making a paycheck. I was working a full-time job.
Driving tourists around.
Right. So I moved back to Utah to finish up my school, and I had some money. And that was the first time, this is 1994, I was like, all right, I'm kicking down. I'm going to buy a set of 1200s and a proper mixer instead of me going over to somebody's house. I've got crates of records. Soon after that, in 95 is when I got my first paying DJ gig, like a weekly show, a weekly party that I was doing in Salt Lake. I just went to the crummiest club. I was actually working at a clothing store, slinging denim, and I got fired. And
what'd you do?
It was
Why'd
like,
they fire you?
I can't remember. I think they were cutting back. I don't remember. But I was like, what am I going to do? Anyway, I went to the club, and I was like, hey, I come here and play pool occasionally with my friends, and we hang out here in this. There's nobody ever in this. And when I say club, it was more like a bar. And I was like, dude, what if I come down here and play some records? What's your worst night? And he's like, Monday night, I can't get. He's like, I'm about to just close. I'm like, don't close. Let me come down here and play some records. And I had a lot of friends in Salt Lake because I was snowboarding. So I was part of this kind of snowboarding community, right? And honestly, we didn't even press up a flyer. I didn't go to Kinko's and like scratch something together. I didn't do anything. We just like called a bunch of friends and, hey, come on down. Ryan's playing records. And it was a smash.
That's great.
And I was at that club from 95 till 2000. And essentially,
that's a long time.
Yeah, it was 5 years. And I only missed a couple weeks, every Monday night. And then for a short stint for about 2 years, well, wasn't that short, we had a Thursday night party where was house music, was straight house music. Monday was much more like kind of throwback stuff. I played a ton of disco, some 80s stuff, and then I played like kind of vintage house stuff, whatever. In this environment, it worked. It was kind of a mix smash of old records. But then Thursday night, I started flying people in, promoting my first night, flying other DJs in.
Was anything else going on in Salt Lake at that time? Anything similar, or were you kind of just filling this niche that was needing to be filled at the time?
People were doing nightclubs, and listen, there dance clubs are in every town. I'm convinced of it, and they were in Salt Lake, but it was radio.
Yeah.
When I'm like, I got these crates of records that nobody knows. Like I was a young guy and had lots of friends and girlfriends and whatever, and it just was more of a party. No one was approaching it the way I was doing it. So it was definitely filling this void, and I think that's why it just worked. It was just like, boom, places packed.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we were putting 700, 800, 900 people in this room that the legal capacity was 299, and we'd get it so jamming in there, like sweat from the walls, that kind of thing. And it was just rocking. So many good memories there. I mean, look, even when I was there, I don't know, dude, Michael Jordan came down. It's like anyone who rolled through town, that was the place they went.
Wow, okay. So it went from being a lot.
Brooke Shields, like any actors, because, all these movies get filmed in Utah. They go up to the mountains and film whatever in Park City, and then they come down before they fly out, and they're like, what's going on here? Well, Monday night, there's one club that's popping. So we got all these people that would come through.
But to hear you talk about it from starting off with just you and your snowboard buddies to growing it to where Michael Jordan's stopping by, that's a pretty big progression.
It was cool. But I think that goes to say that there wasn't a whole lot going on in Salt Lake.
Fair enough.
So it's easy for me to make my mark.
Yeah.
And really a couple years into that, I was making enough money that's when I started buying my first studio gear.
Okay.
That's when I was like, okay, kick down for the computer, bought an 808, bought a 909, got a 303, SH101. I just started buying gear bit by bit and slowly started making my music.
Well, and that music, when did you sort of think, not only could I DJ this, but I could make this? I could, put my own spin on it?
Very early on. I think that's part of the appeal to electronic music.
Right.
I think everyone kind of thinks that.
Low bar to entry, right?
Right. And I even thought that when I was going out in the 80s because the music was so rudimentary. It was so rhythm driven. And I really liked that about it. The raw nature of house music.
I wanted to explore
really
that. Was it the rhythm of it that, can you point your finger at what really drew you in about house and not some other genre?
I think the biggest thing that drew me in is the excitement around new music. The fact that it was so new, and I was in Chicago where this like bomb was going
Right.
off. That's what pulled me in. There was just like this air of excitement, and the parties were rocking, and it was just like, we've never heard this before. It was just so different.
Those are special moments, right?
Man.
When it's something really new. I think, we're only lucky enough to experience those moments a few times in
Yep.
our life. I definitely have a couple. I remember the first time that Justice came to the
Oh, man.
States,
Yep.
and I remember seeing them. I think it was their first ever Chicago show at Smart Bar. And
Holy cow.
it was-
Downstairs?
Yeah, downstairs.
They were DJing.
At Smart Bar.
What?
This was like I don't even know if their album had come out yet. It was like very, very
Just some cool buzz on the blogs
Yeah.
happening.
100%.
I think
But
I've heard about this show.
yeah. Oh man. I mean, it was exactly like you were saying. It was probably, I don't know what the capacity of the Smart Bar is, but it was 3 times that, packed wall to wall.
And people are just like pulling their hair out,
Yeah.
flipping out.
Yeah.
man.
And it was one of those moments where, because when they came out, I had never heard anything like it.
Right.
And the style and the attitude and just being there, everyone thought the same thing in that room for those couple hours,
Yeah.
and we all had the same reactions. Those moments, I think, are really rare.
They are. And I've been very lucky to be a part of a couple different waves. That first wave of Chicago house music, seeing that. And then kind of whatever you want to refer to this next wave of whatever EDM or when dance music kind of went wide in the States.
Right.
To kind of see and experience that and be a part of it was, I don't know, man, something special.
So let's try to work up to there a little bit. So you're in Utah. You've started making some early productions, or at least tinkering around with some drum machines.
Right.
And you've grown your party to be this juggernaut in Salt Lake. When do you think about moving? How does that come about? When do you leave the party? And
So during all this, and I'll try and keep it short because we want to get to the other stuff.
well, I mean, yeah, there's a million things we could touch. Don't even worry about it, man.
Look, I met Naomi, who's my wife, who I'm married to. We got very serious very quickly, and she wasn't from Utah, neither was I.
Right.
And she was like, cool, as much as I love Utah, the second I graduate. I met her as I was finishing school, and she was beginning school. And which was fine because my night was rocking and I was having a good time. I mean, dude, I'm DJing 2-3 nights a week and like
It's the dream at that age.
hanging out in the studio and like eating Cheetos and pizza and
Yeah.
cold cereal. I mean, honestly, I was like, life cannot get better than this. I can't imagine.
100%. I wish I could do that right now. That
And then
sounds great.
every free moment I was snowboarding, outside of like studio, DJing, eating pizza or cold cereal. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
like the best life.
cold pizza.
Cold
yeah.
pizza. I mean, it was just like post-college, like I have no clue what I'm doing. Anyway, we got serious. She graduated and literally she was like, look, whoever gets a job in whatever city, because I wanted to go back to New York because I had spent a year there and I liked New York a lot. And I think a lot of Chicagoans feel that pull to New York because it's like the bigger brother of
Yeah, I think
Chicago,
you're
the like the more
absolutely right.
intense
Yeah,
guy.
the grittier version. Yeah.
So I felt that pull, and that's why I initially went there. And she was like, I want to go to San Francisco because she grew up in Northern California, and that's where her family was all based. And so I was like, all right, cool. Whoever gets a job, whatever. So she went there, and I went, and whatever. She beat me. She got a great tech job,
Okay.
which only lasted long enough to get me out there and moved into a place. But yeah, we got out to San Francisco, and that, and it took me a while to have San Francisco grow on me,
Sure.
but it was cool because Mark Farina was there, and he was one of the guys I really looked up to, kind of like a musical inspiration, a dude that I turned to and hit up with questions. Probably the biggest mentor in this scene more than anyone. And I say that like, Mark and I aren't that tight. We don't like text each other daily,
sure.
but like he's somebody I've always considered a friend and a mentor and somebody I've always looked up to because his musical taste is probably one of the best out there. And he's an extremely talented DJ.
Yeah.
And I've worked with him in the studio, and the dude is on another level. I mean, what he's thinking is insane. what he's got going on in that brain.
Did you learn a lot about production from him?
Not necessarily
Or from studying
production.
him?
No, I mean, it just, dude, the catalog of music that guy has in his mind and at his fingertips. I can remember we're in his house. I brought like a small laptop set up and we're in there working on a track. And I'm like, man, I really wish we had a sample that sounds like this, and I'm kind of just thinking in my head. And he's like, hold on one second. And we're literally in this room with probably, I don't know, 15, 20,000 records. I mean, like a library of music.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It was like a temple of music going into his house, right?
Right.
And he's like, hold on one moment. Okay, yeah, he walks to the other room, rifles through some records, pulls one out, slaps it on the turntable, plays this record. And I'm like, yep, that's it. That's what I was talking about. That's really weird. How did you know where that record was? Because like I consider myself pretty organized. And this dude was like, he just had like a Rain Man moment where he's like, hold on, yep, I know where that sample is. Hold on. Boop, 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 boop. And like went there and grabbed it.
His own version of the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, man. Yeah. Unreal.
Well, in San Francisco at that time, not a bad place for house music.
Well, cool. Here, this is it. I moved to San Francisco, and this is in 2000, and I feel like it's kind of bubbling up. And I'm like, seriously? Am I going to get to experience this again? This is crazy.
Yeah, you caught the next wave, kind of.
It was like the West Coast had discovered house music and it matured some more, and like this new wave of more refined, more produced, more melodic, Naked Music, Miguel Miggs, Ohm Records, like this whole thing was kind of blossoming and happening in San Francisco. And that's going on while this tech money's just being dumped into the city. So people just want to party. The clubs are full. I don't care if it's Tuesday afternoon. I mean, dude, what was 111 Minna had a party. It was a happy hour thing. And I don't even remember what day it was. It was like a Tuesday or Thursday. And you'd go in there, and there's 800 people just like working it out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, hands in the air. And I'm like, where did I just slip into? This is amazing.
Got to thank your wife, I guess.
Oh, man. I shouldn't admit that she was right, but she was right.
It's all right. We can edit this part out.
No, she was definitely right. Going to San Francisco was the move. I fell in love with the city. It really became my musical home. All these places are kind of part of my story.
Did you become Kaskade around that time?
Yeah. Right when I moved there, I got a job at Ohm Records being the A&R assistant, and I had sold them some music under a different name. Because when I got there, I had demos from working in the studio in Salt Lake. I had all this music that I had been like working up over the last 3-4 years.
Had anything been released at that point?
I had self-released some stuff that's really bad. But the first records always are.
Yeah, I was about to say it sounds familiar.
Yeah, but it's fun to go back and listen to that stuff. Anyway, and I'd sold them some kind of drum and bass, down-tempo stuff under a different name. Skylight was the name.
Okay.
I don't know. And then it just kind of spun out of control. I came up with the idea of Kaskade because I was so influenced and impressed by what was happening in San Francisco, this very melodic, song-based music. And this is all going on also when, like, what's happening in the UK, like sneaker pimps and, like, all this kind of funky, cool, down-tempo stuff that's song-driven.
Yeah,
but the production's really forward-thinking.
Sure, more Chiba and all of those.
All of that, man. More Chiba's right there. Yeah, man. So it's all coming out, and I'm like, this is crazy. And San Francisco had their take on that. They had Solstice was an amazing band, and I'm working at the label, and I was like, all right, because my records up to that point were very rudimentary, cutting up disco sound, very Chicago, jacking kind of raw stuff. And that's when I was like, it can be, this is real music now. We have the ability with the power of computing and where things are at, and this stuff is incubated long enough that it's not just like producer DJ stuff. We're really getting out stuff that's musical, can go well beyond the walls of dance music.
Right. Were you writing songs as far as lyrics and melodies at this point?
This is when I started. Okay. When I was like, wow, look how successful Solstice has been. And I knew Andy and Gabe and Gina. These are the people that made, and Malin, the people that made up that band. And I kind of watched how they did it because I was right there at the label. I saw it from an idea to, wow, this is a successful touring band. And I just knew that lyrics and melody were, I thought it was something I could do. My dad was a good writer. My grandma was an incredible poet, a great writer. And I thought I could do this. I enjoy writing. This could be my niche. What's going to separate me? Because at that point, that's when it was like, wow, everyone wants to be a DJ. It was that wave of like, wow, this is a thing now.
Yep.
So I needed something more. And I kind of put my mind to it that would be my thing, but just be more song-based. Because by that time, look, I loved drum and bass, and I loved downtempo, and I loved all these different production styles, and house was still in my heart, and I still love that Chicago vibe.
Yeah, the energy.
Well, it's just what I grew up listening to, right? It's always that first sound holds a special place in your heart. Yeah,
you're always trying to get back there, right?
Right. So I just decided that was going to be my space, and that was going to try and do, and I released a couple singles, came up with the name Kaskade, and, and luckily it took pretty quickly on. I mean, when I say it took, the measure of success was so much different then than it is today. It's pre-SoundCloud, Right. I said when it took, we were still pressing up vinyl at home, and we put out What I Say. And I mean, dude, I remember getting these little zines in these cities, these little pocket magazines, and one of them reviewed What I Say, and Herb reviewed one of my records. I was like, oh my gosh. It was kind of like that moment you had when your CD was at gramophone.
Yeah. Those are big moments.
I was like, I just couldn't. I mean, I was on the same pages as Mark Farina and Derek Carter and, all these guys that I had been watching from the UK. And I was like, this is crazy.
Right.
Seems within reach. I need to keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like if you had already been throwing this successful party for years and flying people in to come play, you were probably able to draw off of some of those experiences watching other successful people and learning what makes them unique and what makes them special. We probably have a lot of young producers listening to the show, and I always try to point out that, if you can figure out that one way to sidestep the rat race, or one way to make yourself stand out, and not just be another DJ.
That's it.
DJs.
That's it. How are you gonna listen? There's so many musicians, so many acts, so many touring acts. I mean, there's just so many people out there. You have to find something that is unique to you and really hone in on that and polish it up and make it yours and claim that. I mean, whether it's wearing a marshmallow head around or a mouse head around, I mean, whatever. I mean, these different people have done different things to catapult themselves into the spotlight. And then it becomes a game of, well, what are you going to do with that? Like,
right.
How are you going to maneuver after that?
And that's such a great point because, I think it's so easy for people to get angry at someone who's successful and they say, it's just because he wears a mask, or it's just because he wears that red jacket, or, whatever it is.
Right.
But I think what gets lost is that, sure, that might initially make people look at you, but then once they're looking at you, if you don't have something to say and some substance, they'll just stop
It'll be
looking.
Gone pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, you've been listening to this music long enough, and I have. There are a lot of guys that come and go that are a flash in the pan. And, I think that's something that I really love about electronic music in the underground is that it moves really quickly.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. It's because I get bored really easily. So it's cool that things are moving around really quickly.
Sure. Once you've started releasing records, you're seeing some success. I assume seeing, some paychecks from music, which must have been exciting. Those first paychecks, or at least for me, were kind of mind-blowing.
It's awesome.
And at that point, were you all in? Were you...
Nah, kind of. I mean, look, I was always all in. I think, I don't know, maybe it's the conservative Chicago boy in me. I just was like, there's no way that I can make a living doing this. Is this really going to take care of me?
So even as you're doing it, you were still not really thinking it was happening.
I mean, Naomi this whole time is like, when are you going to get serious? When are you, what are you going to do to take care of us? How are you going to provide? And I was like, I don't know, give me some space. Why are you sweating me, man? What? Like, we're having fun. And she was too. And,
right.
and she was really sweating me. She's not like that.
Of course.
But there was just conversations that were kind of like, well, what do you see, where are you taking this? And I could never, and I think she was just trying to.
Question.
It is totally. I mean, I'm married to this girl. What, you have expectations? Come on.
Yeah.
But I think she was trying to put me in a corner and have me say, no, I'm going to do music. And I would never say that. And it kind of made her a little nutty. Because here I am. I'm 10 years into this career path already. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I like this DJing thing. It's pretty fun. I don't know. Just give me some space. But
do you think that was a way for you to do you think if you had accepted it and said, yes, I'm doing it, that would have brought in a whole nother level of anxiety or stress or pressure?
Yep. I never wanted to say it out loud because then you can fail.
Right.
And there is that pressure. When for me, it was just like, I never wanted that mantle. I didn't want that sitting on my shoulders. I just wanted to have a good time, make some records, throw a party, play a show, whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, and that's what's great about the music. It is fun. It's young. It's a good time. You know, when you take this
100%.
stuff too seriously, it's like, oh man, I'm not interested. This is some sleepy whack, whatever. This
Well,
sounds like
any
an old guy.
hobby, when a hobby becomes work, right? That's when it stops being fun.
Totally.
And that's the line, any musician has to walk.
This is why in my studio I have a bunch of arcade games.
Yeah, we gotta, once we turn this up, we gotta talk about that too.
Yeah. I mean, it's about having. I come here, I get to screw around every day for work. You know, when I'm not on the road, I come here and I like mess around on video games. Come here, work on a song for a little bit. I understand that you can't take this too seriously.
Sure.
So
Well, getting back to Ohm Records and your early work, you put out the first couple singles. That leads, I assume, to the first album, kind of in short order, right?
yeah, I mean, it intensified quickly.
Yeah.
Those first few singles did well. My DJ heroes were playing these things, and I was like, okay, this is all happening. The label signed me to a record deal. Beyond just singles, they wanted an album. And I was
Yeah.
like, awesome. I love the idea of an album, and I always have, and maybe that's why I've made 9 of them. Because I think in the DJ world, in the electronic music world, it gets so single-driven all the time. And I'm like, look, man, it's once again, I hate that pressure. Oh, man, I need to make something today that I'm going to play at 1:30 in the morning. The place is
Right.
going to go bananas. It's got to have this drop. It's just like, I just don't operate that way.
Right.
So for me, it's like, cool, I'm going to sit down and write 15 or 20 songs. It'll be a cohesive idea and have a look and feel and a sound, and you'll feel something when you put it on. And cool, I think just naturally that moment happens, or one or two of those moments happens in that story where, cool, this is great, peak time, I can
Right.
play this at EDC, people flip out or whatever. But there'll be a lot of cool, quiet moments that still resonate with people and that really have been a huge part of my success. My fan base is really wide and extremely diverse. I mean, we're always trying to get a handle on who's listening to me. When I say we,
Yeah.
the team, like, well, who do we market to? Or we're selling tickets. How do we do this? And it's like, we never know because it's so
You're right.
different. I mean, I'll never forget the time that I went to play. This is pretty early on in my career. I went to go play a show in Atlanta, and my stuff was quite soulful at the time, and this lady wrote me from my website just tearing me a new one because her and her husband had gotten a babysitter for the night and showed up. The doors opened at 7, thought I was going to be
Oh,
on by
right.
8:30, 9 o'clock. Here I walk on at 1 in the morning. These people had already left.
Right.
And she's like, I paid the $20, and just couldn't believe that a guy like me that wrote such beautiful music and, wouldn't, you marked it on the calendar wrong. You're actually playing on the next day, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
That's a 1-star Yelp review right there.
She just killed me. She thought I was the worst thing. I'll buy your music, but I'll never come to a show
Oh,
again. And I'm
wow.
like, oh, dang it.
But that is a pretty rare audience member for people who make the music we make and play the shows we play.
Sure.
I think that speaks to the diversity of your audience. Do you consider that diversity when you're making music? Is that ever a thought in your head?
Not really. At the end of the day, I'm really trying to satisfy something in myself. When I start thinking outside of that is when I get riddled with anxiety and
Yeah.
have a hard time sleeping and grinding my teeth. When I just come in here and I'm like, I want to make something cool that I
Yeah.
can play or that I want to listen to in my car, that's when it works best for me. So I try and kind of keep it within those constraints.
Sure.
Unless somebody's hired me as a producer or I'm working on somebody else's music, it's a lot easier for me to take it out of my space. Cool, this isn't me. Or even when somebody wants me to remix something of theirs and they're like, hey, dude, I need it to be like this. And I'm like, yeah, I think I can make that happen. I could see the song sounding like that. Cool, let me work on it and see
Right.
what I get. But when it's for me and my own and it's a Kaskade tune, I'm very particular and I'm extremely selfish.
Yeah, which is, I think, how you should be. I think that's how you get to the core of you, right? And what's authentic to you, which is a theme you've talked about a lot already in this conversation, is not putting that pressure on yourself and just kind of taking your experiences and seeing what comes out of it.
That's it.
And, if that comes out in the form of an album, not feeling that pressure to, try to parcel it up into a hot single and I like that view. I think that's something, because in 2017, there's this pressure, especially with, Spotify and the streaming services,
Oh,
that
man.
you're only as hot as your last song. And
That's
if you don't top the song you put out last month, then you're done. There's kind of this crazy pressure that people
It's
put
a
on
crazy
themselves.
time. And I think it's going to change. I think as more and more people get
think
into
it
the
has
streaming.
to.
I mean, just because there's other people out there that don't want to hear the peak time thing all day, all night.
Right.
There's other gems out there, the B-sides, that people really do enjoy. And there's an audience out there for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your music, we've touched on that it's very song based. It's the core of a lot of these songs is a lyric or a melody. To me, that's what makes your music stand out from maybe some of your contemporaries. Is that while, like you said, there is a drop, or maybe there is this high energy moment, or this low energy moment, this vibe, but it's all built around a lyric or a song or a melody. Would you agree with that?
100%. I wrote a song, I don't know, in 2005, 2006 called Lyrics and Melody. And it's about that. It's, to me, the lyric and the melody are what sticks. You can produce the song any way, dude. It could be at 160 BPM and some weird halftime thing, or it can... I don't know. There's so many ways to produce things, and now it's even more so than ever. I mean, the power of computing is crazy. I can sit here and whatever. We can make dubstep one day, make a slow jam the next day, an R&B song the next day. It's not about that, really.
Yeah.
As much as I love house music and that's my core, and I always kind of gravitate back towards that. Yeah, dude, a strong lyric and a memorable melody. That's what people go back to.
Yeah, it's timeless, I think. And for me, we're sitting here looking at all this expensive, fancy gear, and what we do all day is sit in front of our gear and play around with it, stare at a screen. But, what cuts me to the core more than anything else is the human voice. Someone could just sing a song with no backing at all, and I could start to cry, and it's...
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody gets up with a guitar and they sing you a song, and you're like, okay, that's we don't need anything else.
Right. Yeah, I could throw out my whole studio at that point.
Really, when I have a beautiful song and it's something I've worked on, or maybe somebody wrote it and they brought it to me and they want me to work on it, if it's something I really love, it's always trying to get the production to not get in the way of the song, right? You're trying to help this stuff, not take away from it. And that's always a difficult line to walk from the artist-producer zone, because hey, I want to show you I got skills, man.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to inject too much of your ego into it.
Right.
But sometimes you do.
Right.
And it's hard to, at least for me, it's hard to fight that impulse sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's the line. But I think, you hear it in a great record. It's like that perfect balance of, and I mean, that's what I'm always trying to strike, is that perfect balance between lyrics, melody, and forward-leaning production, something sonically that is magical.
Right.
I mean, we've all heard those instrumental records that still tug at our heart, that you're like, oh my gosh, that lead is speaking to me. It's saying something. I don't know what it's saying, but this record works with me.
Right.
Then you take a record like that, and that's why I love making mashups, man, because I find these really cool instrumental records that work for me. They don't need anything more. And then, oh my gosh, I have one of my songs. It's in the same key and this chord progression works. Let me throw the vocal on top and see if some magic happens.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I get one of those that's just like, oh, this works. And that all came out of the idea when I was touring maybe, 5-6 years ago. Once again, technology took a leap forward, and it was much easier to see the key and tempo of everything just right in your library in front of you. And I was just trying to get ready for some gigs, and I was just mashing up. It was me and a handful of guys were out there just mashing up more and more records to try and, make the sets exciting and have new material.
Sure.
I don't know, that became a really fun kind of pastime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, it goes back to the core of what you were saying, how you started just chopping audio, right?
Yep.
And for me too, that's kind of how I got into it. But let's take that concept of, interesting sounds and progressive technologies, and in relation to what you were doing kind of as this new wave in 2006, 2007, 2008, this new rise of electronic music, another wave coming up.
The boom.
Yeah. I mean, how did you experience that at first?
Man,
Because you were in it. I mean, you were one of the...
San Francisco was having a moment, and like house music and naked music, home record. I mean, dude, it was just all kind of happening. And then it just got like bigger and grander. And I think that was partly due to the technology. You could make records sound bigger. And for me, it was like I heard an Axwell record, Mambana. I think that's actually one of his first records on Sulfuric.
I know that record, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Dude, to this day, you put it on, I get weak in the knees. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, it's happening. I love this. You know, it's like a Latin influence. Not like some little white kid from Northbrook, Illinois should love the record, but I do love this record.
100%, yeah.
So anyway, I heard that record and to me, that was kind of the beginning of what EDM, it was just house music, but not how a Chicago person imagined it.
Right.
It was polished. It was clean. The production was so big.
Yeah.
It was just warm and big and just sounded so professional where
Right.
house music didn't have that sound up to that point in my mind.
Yeah. It was more of that mass
and then just
appeal.
like that wave of stuff came out that just, I don't know, it was like the late 2000s where it just went crazy. I don't know, and part of it was just bigger, bolder sounding records.
Did your records change as a result of that movement? Was that a conscious thing? Or did you just kind of get caught up in the movement itself and the excitement? And I mean, you were actively helping shape it too. I don't want to gloss over that.
Sure. I think the way I helped shape it is not to overstate this, but I do. But this is I've never had an opportunity to speak about this to anyone really. BPM radio, SiriusXM was a huge supporter and an early adopter of my music, and I think that's because I treated the lyrics and melody so importantly and put them up front. It was about a song, and I was remixing high-profile stuff. And I think the reason labels were coming to me, they were like, oh, this guy knows how to work with vocals. Because there was only a handful of guys at the time that were really doing it properly.
Right.
So that kind of became my thing, and Sirius was just pumping my remixes and my music. And stylistically, I was much quieter and subdued than what was happening.
Right.
I was like, whoa, who put on the ambient record, man? Who's this Kaskade? I mean, dude, when I went over to Europe to play gigs, they're like, what in the hell are you playing, dude?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
This isn't the chill out room, man.
Yeah, like, what do you think you're doing? You know, I'm there at like 123, like, and they're just like, what the? Get this guy out of here, man. And I'm like, what? In San Francisco? This is huge, you know? Anyway.
But you look at what they're doing now, and you were kind of just early on it, you know?
That's exactly the way I like to think about it. We were a decade ahead of them, man. I think, look, as a touring DJ, it's hard not to be influenced by other people's records because all this input's happening all the time.
Right.
People are sending you records. I become friends with these guys. They're iChatting me, iMessaging me. Check this out. And although the sound palette was quite different, I liked it.
Yeah.
Especially like the Swedish stuff. I was really like, wow. And some of the early Dutch stuff, I was like, wow, this is cool. When it started getting really noisy, I was like, wait, am I getting old? What's happening? I don't like this. I don't like that sound. What's happening? But where I contributed was the fact that so much music was instrumental. Dance music was just basically an instrumental music up to then. I mean, there was like these weird flashes of, gospel house and, you know, these early house records that were full vocals, but then it went really instrumental for a long time. I mean, dude, thousands of records are being put up on Beatport, and it's like, you rarely heard a vocal record.
Right, of course.
I was over here in San Francisco, just like vocal record after vocal record after vocal record. And when they started poking through on SiriusXM, I think that's when people started paying attention to me.
Right.
They're like, what in the hell is this guy doing? His production is way more lax than what I like, but let's do this kind of thing. I imagine that these guys were having quiet conversations of how they could rip me, my vocal styling,
Sure.
you know, but then just put it to their production. And then I think that same thing, the counter to that was I was out DJing and playing all these clubs and being around these people and going to Ibiza every summer. And yes, my sound was getting bigger, bolder, a bit more bold, but still in the grand scheme of things, it was like chill music compared to what was going on. I mean, even to this day, it's like,
sure.
I mean, you look at Steve Aoki on the same plane with me, it's like, oh my gosh, these are two totally different things. But I say that, and then Steve's newest record with it sounds like a record that I would have made a while ago. It's very, timid and laid back.
That's something, I was wondering what you thought of kind of the 2017 version of EDM, where a lot of big name producers are now almost turning it into pop music, which is in a way what you were doing, 10 years earlier.
Oh, now we're to the heart of it. Yes, thank you. You said it. I didn't even have to say it. Thank you.
I mean, I hadn't even thought about it that way until last night. I was listening to some of your older records, knowing I was going to talk to you, and I was like, wait, this is actually very similar to what I'm hearing right now. And I hadn't made that connection.
There's some similarities and there's some differences. Look, I was never writing records to be on the radio. I was writing records.
That was never a goal.
That was never a goal because no dance artist would ever be on the radio. That's just freaking crazy.
Right.
Until David Guetta came along, we're like, what? Dance records could be on the radio? I mean, listen, you had the random thing that would pop up like a Robin S. record that would Show Me Love broke through in the 80s. Sure. And Delight in the early 90s. So you always had these random moments where dance records pop through. But just as far as like artist, producer, DJ guys that were out there, popping through the radio, it just didn't happen until Guetta came along. So I was writing records for the dance floor, and my melodies were never hooky enough to cross over. I mean, even like my biggest hooky records, 4 a.m. or Angel on My Shoulder, or any of these things, they're still really, to this day, they're not super pop. They're not real, it's not candy-coated quite enough, but yet they work in a nightclub. And that's always kind of was my target.
Right.
Right? And it wasn't until recently that I kind of opened up a bit more to the idea of, cool, there is more out there. I've been making records for a long time, and I'm not against the radio, whatever, dude. A good pop tune's a good pop tune. I mean, dude, when Dark Horse from Katy Perry came out, I was like, this is everything that a pop record should be. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's dynamic. The production's forward thinking. Like, I wish I made this record. Right. That is awesome. And those records come along every now and again. And so cool. It's not like I'm like, I only make records for the dance floor. I think I'm just trying to make good music now and make stuff that works and resonates and that satisfies something in me. But
it sounds like you haven't changed your core approach over the years.
No, I haven't. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm definitely, I'd say in the last 2-3 years, as another change has come through electronic music, I'm not against it either.
Right.
But I have, like I said, I'm extremely selfish and I'm very particular. So when I get in a room and I'm writing with somebody else, I'm like, my way or the highway, dude.
Well, and it is funny to hear you talk about your contemporaries coming up at that time and that you were doing it at the same time, but making different styles of music. I had Joey, Wolfgang Gardner, on the show. And he talked a lot about...
Love that guy. I love that dude.
He loves you, man. Your name came up a lot, actually, while I was talking to him. And he said you kind of mentored him or were someone he could go to for support, and that he didn't really have a lot of people around him at that time who he could talk to about...
Oh, man, that's cool to hear, dude, because I love that dude, and I always loved his music. And I got his demos early on because we were both living in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And very, very early on, I was like, this kid's got something special, man. He's insanely talented. I just loved what he was. I've always loved what he's done.
Yeah. No, he's a special one. Do you remember any of those early encounters with him?
I do. We hung out in Chicago. We hung out in Texas. And, we always had really cool and interesting conversations because we came from a very similar place. We had experienced San Francisco at the same time.
Sure.
And he loved house music like I did, but he understood that the scene was changing and diversifying and things were happening, and he was opening himself up to that. And I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
He was Joey Youngman, then he was Wolfgang Gardner. I'm like, this is freaking awesome, dude. Whatever you're making, I'm into. I don't care what you call yourself, dude.
Right.
Just keep sending me demos, please. it was cool. Some of those nights that we got to eat dinner and have conversations, you know, I was not that much ahead of him, really. A little bit, sure,
Right.
but I was always just trying to impart some kind of wisdom that I had learned along the way that he could, you know, misstep because I had made a lot of mistakes along the way and things that I
Right.
wished, I wish I did that differently.
Right.
So it's cool that he thinks of it that way because, you know, I was just trying to help a cool kid out, man. He was
Yeah,
extremely
100%.
talented.
In all of this, you know, we could talk about a million different things here at this point, and you're continuing to put out albums all throughout this time. At a certain point, you leave Ohm Records, signed to Ultra, right? Was
That's
that
right.
kind of the progression?
Right.
How did you find working with a more or less a giant label coming from Ohm? You know, I would assume more resources, but maybe also more restrictions or more cooks in the kitchen. Or
No.
were they pretty hands off?
Early on, and for the majority of the time that I was there, and I get this question quite a bit when I do interviews, like, well, what was it like switching to essentially what a major is? And I was
Sure.
like, well, at the time when I switched, I didn't even think of them like that. I just thought, oh, these guys have their hand in more things, and they're
Yeah.
a bit more diverse than what Ohm Records was. Ohm was a very, very specific sound. You know, I think looking back at it, I think they're like, you just do your thing. It's working.
They just wanted to.
We just want more of that because
Yeah.
they came to me and they're like, dude, Stepping Out, which was the first single off my second album. They're like, that's a radio crossover hit. And I'm like, really? You think so? I'm like, dude, do dance music records go on the radio? Like,
Yeah.
their pitch to me, that was kind of their thing. Like,
Right.
that is such an incredible record. I'm like, thank you. I love it too. It's very different from what's out there.
Right.
And not many DJs played that record, but it was huge for me. And it was definitely one of those moments where I went up a couple notches.
Yep.
But nobody was playing anything like that. And people certainly weren't using acoustic guitar in their dance production. I
Right.
mean, this is just an odd record. So I think they were just like very, like, let him do his thing. And they honestly, I mean, dude, this is going to be crazy. The first few albums I turned into them, talk about being selfish and whatever, I would give it to them, and I'd even give it to them in the sequence. I would literally like, here's the record, it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, well, do you want some A&R help and this and that? I'm like, A&R help? Like, I didn't even understand that concept at the time.
Right.
Like, oh, you can help me make I got it, dude. No,
Yeah,
it's cool. I
no,
make
it's
my own
already done.
records.
Yeah.
Here it is. I think track 7 could be a single, maybe. I don't know. See what you guys think. And then as that relationship went on, and they started putting me in, you know, like, hey, this person's a brilliant songwriter. Why don't you have a session with them? I'm like, all right, I don't know. I think I'm a pretty good songwriter. Why do I have this guy in here with me? You know, I just didn't understand the, like, more of the kind of community process behind making a record.
Right.
That was so foreign to me. And you know, it took me a long time to open up to those ideas.
Do you still tend to kind of just like to do it yourself, or at this point, do you enjoy the collaborative process?
I prefer to do it myself because, I don't know, because I'm selfish.
Yeah, I do too.
And I think I'm right all the time.
Yeah, I do too. I'm the same way.
But look, I've grown and I've matured a lot and I've made a lot of music. So now I'm much more laid back. Well, I think over the last 2 or 3 years, certainly since I've put this studio in here, dude, I've been here for over a year now, and it's like, cool, I'm right in LA. People can come over here and hang out, and we can make records, and I don't feel that pressure to like, well, if I made it, I got to put it out. Where before in my career, I felt that.
Right.
I mean, dude, in this room, and I said this when I wrote kind of my year-end blog piece last year, I'm like, I've made more music over the last year, now I could say over the last 2 years, than I've made, you know, if I collectively take the 6 years before that or the 5 years before that. I've made so much music, and just the pressure to be like, okay, I'm going to make something, I'm going to put it out. It's just not there. That's what I felt in the beginning of my career. So now I'm like, cool, like, yeah, man, whoever wants to come over, you want to sit down and make a record with me? Right on, dude, I'm all about it.
Yeah, just jam.
If I don't like it, nothing's going to happen.
No one else will hear it.
On my hard drive. But let's sit around and make record and have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, throughout this process, the Kaskade name is growing. I'm sure you're touring more and more. The shows are getting bigger. You're traveling the world, and you have a family at this time. You know, I'm always curious about how people balance out the work and the life, and especially at the level that you're at. And, you know, that must have been such a busy time, you know, when all these opportunities are being presented to you. at least for me, anytime something's popping off, I never want to say no to anything. I want to seize every opportunity. And I can only imagine at that time for you, as many things as you wanted to say yes to, there must have been even more,
I mean,
And then you've got a wife, you started a family at some point.
yeah.
How did that all balance out? Was that a difficult thing?
Yes. Look, I think around 2008, 2009, when this whole thing started to just elevate and stuff started going to the radio, guys that were my contemporaries or guys that I was around started to really become kind of pop stars.
Right.
I'm on the same bills as these guys. A lot of times I was billed over them.
Right.
When that started happening and it started to just go bananas, there's a good 4 or 5 or 6 year period of time where I'd be in an interview and they're like, "What do you do, man? What do you do for fun when you're not doing this?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
I DJ 5 or 6 nights a week, and if I'm not DJing, I am sitting in a room somewhere trying to make tunes that I will be DJing that night. So
Right.
I mean, it got really intense for a minute, but I loved it. And part of that intensity was I couldn't say no. I just couldn't believe people were paying me. I mean, literally. A few years before that, I was going and playing in Minneapolis for dinner.
Right.
And like $100 or $200. It's just like to go from that to, jetting around and being in these hotel suites and, all these opportunities to remix these massive stars. It was a difficult and challenging balance. And I think why I have been able to come out on the other side of that is the fact that I am married and I do have a wife that I love and that kept me grounded and was there for me and willing to make a lot of sacrifices for me to kind of achieve my dreams.
Sure.
That's a huge and important component in this that made it all kind of work.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like she was almost pushing you towards them at certain points.
Well,
or at least pushing you to
until I was
accept
gone
them.
every night. Then she's like, "What the hell is going on here?" And I'm like,
Right.
I'm ovulating. If you want to start a family, hold up.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, it got really crazy there for a minute. And listen, it's still pretty crazy today. I've just learned more about saying no and trying to take more personal time and have days that are for me and my family and setting time aside. But still, I mean, even to this day, dude, it's tough. Naomi and I spend a lot of time in front of our computers looking at the iCal,
Yeah.
and being like, okay, if I give you Tuesday, can you give me Thursday? There's a lot of that back and forth to make
Right.
it ham and a lot of planning and plotting to make sure that we get enough time with one another and with the kids also.
Yeah. I was I had Diplo on the show, and he was talking about his family and his children, and he was saying that, when he's away, when he's on the road, that he almost tries to fill up every minute of his calendar while he's gone.
Yes.
So that he doesn't think about it, and that because otherwise if he's sitting alone in a hotel room, that's time he could have been with his family,
Yep. That's the key. I'm getting as much work done when I'm on the road as possible. People are like, "You look exhausted. You only played an hour. It was an hour flight." And I'm like, "Dude, I worked all night. I sent 500 emails and we did a session at 4 a.m. Down the street." Yeah, it's utilizing that time. I always feel bad when friends come to Los Angeles. They're like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, I keep pretty standard hours here at the studio,
Right.
and like if you can't fit in that window, man, I can't be around, man. I'm taking my little girl to ballet or something. I'm doing these things that I need to do that are important."
Of course. And, again, there's so many more accomplishments that I don't want to gloss over. I guess I'm curious at this point, you're 9 albums in to a 20-plus year career. What's exciting for you at this point? What are you looking forward to? What do you get psyched about doing at this point?
New things.
And what's new at this point?
Well, I think that's why I've opened up this studio more to people. So on the production, writing, producing side of things, creating new music, working with new people, trying new things out that I haven't done. And then on the performance side of things, I'm always looking to go into new spaces. Like
Yeah.
the show I did, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, is the Automatic Tour in San Francisco. When I announced it, people were like, wait, where? And I've done this in a lot of places, which makes for, I apologize to my team all the time. I feel so bad for them because I'm always like, no, we got to go in someplace that no one's ever done a show.
Right.
And I know they hate that. And I think the fans kind of get bummed out sometimes too. Even in LA, they're like, why haven't you gone back to the Coliseum? I'm like, well, I don't know. I did it.
Yeah. And everybody goes there.
We've done that. I've done Staples Center. Right. And listen, I fight that urge because it's always better as a touring musician when you go back into a place, you kind of learn the pitfalls of that room, the good and the bad. Like, oh, we can make the sound better. We can make the experience for the fan better if they enter over here, over there, whatever. So for me, I'm just always trying to, do new and fun things. And I think Redo's part of that. Going back, I don't play these small rooms. When I went to Minneapolis, I played a room with 250 people in there. It was probably 110 degrees. We were sweating to death. I drank like 30 gallons of water.
And I saw on that tour you played my friend's club in Milwaukee, formerly Oak, now Site 1A.
Yes.
And I remember when you first were booked there, the guys who own that club are old friends of mine, and they were just, they couldn't believe that was happening. And, it was so cool to me because I've played in that room too. And
it's a great room.
Yeah, great room.
I think when I do Redo, the bad side of Redo, and I'm saying this because it's fresh in my memory, people really get upset with me. And honestly, this is the first time that I announced it. And it's, it sells out in like minutes. Most of these venues sell out in seconds.
Right.
I do it because it's fun and it satisfies something in me. It's like I'm going back 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, to play in these rooms where I'm having that experience like I had when I DJ'd in college, where it's just like, people just flipping out, and I'm in their face, and they could touch the CDJ and make it skip and screw it up.
Those special feelings we were talking about before, right? You're always trying to get back to it.
Trying to get back to it, man. But this time, people got so angry that they didn't get tickets, and they get angry at me, and I'm
right.
And I'm one of those. I'm kind of a softie inside, so I'm like, man, don't be mad at me.
Yeah. But what can you do, really? Because
I tweeted you the time that it went on sale. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, and it's, you can't spend the rest of your life playing those small rooms, but for those people who are there, I mean, that's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
It's a lot of fun.
And for you, too,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Sort of as a period on the end of all these sentences is that recently, you were talking about playing unique spaces and these new ideas for shows that you do. And I know recently you came over to Circle Booking Agency, which is also my booking agency.
Awesome.
And I was seated next to Steve Gordon at a wedding recently, and he was talking about how that had just happened.
Wow. Awesome.
And he was really excited. And, at this level of the game, I think that's pretty rare for an artist to make that switch. Was that kind of more about just wanting to try new ideas and keep things exciting?
I think there's an element in that. I mean, I switched record labels recently, management and agent.
So the whole team.
I changed everybody out. And I think there's part of that is that, just get new, young, fresh people around me, fresh approach. I'd been doing things a certain way for a really long time and wanted to try it differently. The reason I looked to Circle, I've known Kevin for a while now, and I met with Kevin and Steve who run Circle. Yep. And what impressed me about them is when this whole thing blew up, a lot of my time would be sitting in a room talking to somebody who knows where I have to explain what a DJ is.
Right.
Like, no, I'm not a morning personality. Back to this thing we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And it's tiring. And for people who don't know and understand the scene, and these guys came up as promoters, as ravers, Steve and Kevin, no, we speak the same language. So for me, it was exciting and very refreshing to be able to speak that same language with somebody and then try and realize where the opportunities for me are out there and kind of isolate those together and go and seize them. I think it's difficult. A lot of people, when the whole EDM boom happened, everyone wanted to be in. I mean, I met with probably 5 or 6 different movie producers and screenwriters that I want to make a movie. The movie's going to be about you, or the movie's going to be about EDM. And the movie, I went to your show, and these people have to experience this. I'm like, dude, there's no way you're putting this on the screen. It's just not going to translate, dude. There's nothing. I mean, if
when
you
you
can,
see what happens when they try.
Yes,
right?
it's just utter failure, right? So I don't know. There's something magic about that, and to try and bottle it up and put it out on something is hard. But the point of that is it's really difficult to try and explain that to people who haven't been living it or haven't at least been around it for a while. And what attracted me to Circles, that these guys just know and understand and speak the same language that I do, and that's just exciting.
Yeah. Well, where are you at with EDM in 2017? You know, the landscape has changed so drastically, and we were talking about how it, you know, in some cases, EDM is just pop music now. It's so saturated, you know, everyone's trying to get in. The old joke of everyone wants to be a DJ is actually not really a joke anymore.
Right.
And I mean, do you even see yourself as part of that wave, that scene? Or at this point, you've been doing what you've been doing for so long. Is it just kind of you're sticking to your guns and doing what you've always done, being true to yourself?
Listen, I'd be foolish to say I'm not a part of that thing. Even though as it was happening and things were going crazy, I never associated myself with all of that. I'm like, these guys are wearing masks around. Their music is so over the top when I'm being soft and subtle, and I'm whispering, they're screaming. And, but I guess we're all we're doing similar things. And it didn't make me angry that I was associated with them. I just thought, actually, I'm quite different than those guys. You know, I'm over here writing albums. These guys are writing songs and whatever. I saw myself differently, and I think that has a lot to say of why I'm still around and why I'm more relevant today than I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm playing and selling more tickets than I ever have.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's exciting. I feel like for a couple years ago, I was really kind of down. I was a little bit bummed on where things were because everyone had jumped ship. Like, I'm not a part of that. And I'm like, well, dude, I never was a part of it.
Right.
You know, like, whatever.
Right.
Who
so
cares?
You saw some people just sort of chasing the trends a little bit.
Like, dude, this is everyone, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can't hate on that. I'm just like, whatever. If they're finding that music exciting, go for it, dude. I don't, whatever. I bobbed and weaved and made different sounds and experimented with things my entire career.
Right.
But I think that's part of the reason it sounds legitimate.
Right.
I've always done that. So
Yeah.
well, that's part of my story. But I don't know where it's headed. I think right now there's just this huge divide between there's guys that are in the pop realm, and then there's guys in the underground. I think that's why bass and techno are so healthy right now. I mean, dude, the techno parties are just rocking all over the country, all over the world, you know? And that's kind of like what the new underground is. And then there's the pop stuff. I think what's interesting for me is I don't really fit in either of those worlds, and I'm still kind of like out here with a machete trying to carve my own path.
Right.
And I associate with both these worlds, man. I want to write songs that people want to listen to, sure, And if that goes pop, cool, whatever. But I still love making a good minimal record too. So.
And do you see yourself slowing down anytime soon, or are you still, pretty much just going as hard as you can for as long as you can?
As hard as I can, as long as I'm not in the near future, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's so much more we could talk about, but I don't want to take up your entire day. Is there anything else you want to get out there?
I'm on the redo run of shows right now. I think I've got 8 or 9 cities left. So if I'm coming to a city near you and you like deeper, more subdued things and really cramped, hot, sweaty spaces, come and check it out. I've got a lot of new music coming out, and I've got quite a bit of it coming out before the end of the year that I would speak more about, but I haven't made any kind of announcement. So I'd just say, keep your eye out. There's quite a bit of new music.
Something before the new year.
Yes.
Excellent, man. Well, thanks so much for having me over and doing this, dude.
Thanks, man. It's great. Like I said, it's always great to talk to somebody who, has a similar experience and understands the language. So it's cool. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, Brian, man, thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
peace. All right, that's the show. Thank you so much to Kaskade for sitting down with me for that supersized chat. I hope we'll cross paths again soon. And thank you to all the listeners Whether this is your first time or you've heard every episode, I'm thankful to have all you guys with me. My name is Willy Joy. You can email me at backtobackpod@gmail.com. You can hit me up on social media at Willy Joy is my handle on all social media. Don't forget, the Kaskade Christmas album is out right now, anywhere you can buy music. If you're in San Francisco, New Year's Eve, you got to go spend it with Kaskade, man. Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. The links to all the dates and all the music are in the description of this podcast. We have some crazy plans for 2018. I just can't wait to tell all you guys about it. Tune in next week. We're going to give away another copy of FL Studio 12. And that's it. I love you guys. I'll talk to you next week. Peace.